Dr. Joel Hunter here, and I'm broadcasting live from my home office. Look around, it's amazing. Glad to be here, glad that some of you will be able to show up. I'm not sure who is here yet, but what I'm going to do is do a couple checks here while I wait for people to roll in. So the first thing I'm going to do is check on the controls and make sure everything that I've got set up is going to work. So test number one is the question and answer. So this is pretty nifty. We have a text box on the side here to allow you to submit questions, and I can keep them on my screen to answer as I get to them, and then I can check them off as we go. Really cool if things get crowded, which I don't think they're going to be. But if they do get crowded, then you can roll your question in and I can answer it in order that I get them. So that's pretty cool. That's one tool. The next tool is the showcase, which is going to be a sidebar, at least on my screen it is. I'm not sure exactly how it looks on yours. But it is a sidebar that shows some of the links that I'm going to be talking about and additional information you can check out. So that's tool number two that we're going to see today. And then tool number three is the screencast. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. This is why I've changed from Periscope to doing the Google Hangouts, because this is this just gives me more options to deliver stuff to you and then to be able to take questions, interact, and all of that stuff. So I see a couple folks have chimed in. Can I hear from you? Tell me who's here. I don't have a list here. Are you all catching me? Who's here? Go ahead and say who you are if you chimed in. If you tuned in for Dr. Joel Hunter. All right, let me do the screencast here, and I'll show you what I mean. Because what I'm going to do is pop over to my slide deck when we get to that. So just to let you know, those of you who come in, I am just rolling through a couple of the tools we'll be using. Just want to see that everything's working out okay. And I'm going to share this. So by now, you should be looking at my screen. So what I'll do is start the show. Boom, we'll do the slide deck when we get to that. So I'm just going to stop that for now, and we'll come back to that later. Yep. Okay. Excellent. All right. So I'm not sure, because I've never used Google Hangouts before, but I'm not sure whether the audio works on my end, if I can hear you. So if you're there, can you just speak into your microphone? Hopefully it's hooked up. Can I hear who's here? Okay, I'm not catching anything. So maybe that's something to look at for next week. I'll see if I can find out what needs to happen in order for us to talk to each other in real time. All right, let me come over to the question and answer, since I'm not sure that those of you who first got here saw this. So you should be able to see now on your sidebar a panel that says questions, or it should come up with just a blank space, a sidebar, where you can submit questions. So at any time, since I'm not hearing anyone yet, if you want to pose a question, anytime, just pop it in there and let it go. So, and I'll get to it, when I can. So here's what we could do. If you all are hearing me and you all are picking up this rambling intro, could you just let me know by putting a question into the Q&A, and then let me see it come into the feed. Probably takes a few seconds delay. So if you could just type, just say hi or something like that, let me know that you're here and that you're hearing me. That's most importantly. Yes, I hear you. So now this is cool. I'm going to select it. Let me see what happens. That was from Leslie. Hi, Leslie. Glad you can hear me. I'm not sure that I will be able to hear each other in real time, but at least you can communicate by using the Q&A. So that's cool. All right. Anybody else? I tell you what, let's do it this way then. If everybody who's here, if you could just type in your name, and that way we can get the names of everybody who's here. So Leslie's here, yay. Excellent. So while you all are typing yours, if you, I'm going to just say something. So this is a philosophy class. Yes, it's online, but it's really hard to do philosophy if we can't talk. Naomi's here. Excellent. Thanks, Naomi. And so even though these meetings that I'm going to try to hold weekly are not required, I think it really enhance your experience if you can show up to them live, especially because you get a chance to ask questions real time. So let me select Naomi's here and just clear that. Yeah, cool. Good. And so I think there might be one other person here, or maybe the third person is me. I don't know. But at least there's a couple of you here, and we can get started. So for those of you who are catching this on the replay, you obviously can ask questions too, but you'll have to email them to me. So that's one of the things I liked about this, is the chance to be able to take questions earlier in the week rather than later, because that gives you more time to process my answers, to look things up, to prepare for the quizzes, when you have more time. Whereas if you just catch it on a replay, it might be late, you don't have enough time to sort things out. So that's why I recommend, if you can, show up live. If you can't, that's okay, but catch the replay as quickly as possible. Oh yeah, one other reason I switched over to Google Hangout, or at least I'm trying it, rather than Periscope, is it's stupid easy to get the videos on YouTube. Using Periscope, I had to go through a couple steps and doing Movie Maker and editing. I didn't like that. This is just, boom, it's going to be on YouTube just as soon as we're done with the broadcast. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, enough about the tool. Let's talk about the class. So, I was trying to figure out what I could tell you that I didn't put in the long homepage intro, where I was talking about who I am and what I do. So I thought I'd tell you this story, and I was thinking about the first time I ever really taught, that I was paid to teach, and it was in about 1988, and I was an undergraduate going to Georgia Tech, and I was getting my electrical engineering degree. I had run out of scholarship money. And so I was scraping together money, running up a credit card, trying to make ends meet, eating ramen all the time. And so I was looking for these jobs, that I could squeeze into my class schedule. Common story, right? These days, especially, everybody just about has to pick up some kind of work. So yeah, anyway, I got this teaching job with the Princeton Review. Now, Princeton Review is an SAT prep. They also do things like MCAT and the LSAT and the other standardized tests that are out there, national ones. And yeah, so I taught at, they had us teaching at Oglethorpe University, which is there in Atlanta with Georgia Tech. And it was great, had a blast. And I think from the very first experience of being up in front and doing the performance part of teaching, and seeing, eyes get wide with, realization and knowledge that, I think I could do this. I want to do this. So even though I hadn't even got my engineering degree, I kind of knew I was going to go toward teaching. That was about 30 years ago. And yeah, so I worked as an electrical engineer for a while as a consultant in the environmental field. I designed systems to clean up contaminated sites. And did that on my own even for a while. I had my own business for about 10 years while I was in grad school. So it was in grad school that I made the decision to study philosophy. So I'm that kind of strange person you've never heard of, who has a science background, engineering background, but shifted over into philosophy to become an academic in philosophy. So that's why I'm here. So teaching, not all the time consistently since that first Princeton Review class, but pretty much since certainly solid teaching the last 16 years without a break, seriously. All right, so I guess that's enough really about me and the story, how I got here. But what I want to talk about first, I guess, is the syllabus. And that's the first item on our agenda. We're also going to talk about how to succeed in this class, because I'm going to weave that into talking about the syllabus. I'm going to talk about one of the key elements in succeeding in class is knowing how to read a text and reading it smartly. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit, and I've got content to share with you there, some links. And I want to talk especially about your readings for this week that you've got a quiz on for Sunday. It's due Sunday night at the latest. So I want to talk about some of those things. And one of the key parts of that is going to be talking about arguments. That's central to what we do in philosophy. So I wanted to introduce you to what an argument is with your author, and then talk about how you analyze an argument. I actually have a quiz question that I'm going to show you today, and it is an analysis question. It's analyzing an argument. So I want to step you through that process. It's a really important skill that you can learn in this class, and you're going to use it again and again as we go through the course content. Okay, so let's go to the syllabus. And by the way, anytime you have a question, just fire it in there into the Q&A, and I'll pick it up and answer. So don't feel like you just have to passively sit back. Feel free to ask questions. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is go over to the screen share and pull up something. Here we go. The entire screen. I'm going to share this with you. I'm going to go to the syllabus. Now, hopefully you all can see the syllabus. We have in the class this long description here. You can read this on your own if you haven't already. The two texts that you need are the Fundamentals of Ethics, that's the gold text, and the Ethical Life, which is going to have all of our moral problems in it. So that's the contemporary moral issues. So things like genetic enhancement, terrorism, performance-enhancing drugs, those kinds of things. Various kinds of ethical problems that we deal with today are going to be in the Ethical Life, the second book. So that's the second half of the class. We'll get to the schedule in a minute. Okay, so we got the course objectives. That is what we're aiming for. What I want you to be able to walk away with is in the learning outcomes. And then let's talk quickly about the graded assignments. So there's two things you do. You take a quiz every week, and then at the very end of the class, you turn in an essay, the final analytical essay. And basically what that is, the final analytical essay, is going to be, first of all, a small research part where you're going to go scour the interwebs for an article. Could be a news article, could be a journal article, something in HuffPo or whatever. And that has to do with a moral question. That some sort of ethical problem that we are facing as a society. And so find an article that addresses that or talks about that. And then I'm going to ask you to do like a 3-pager analyzing that article, the moral problem in that article. Let me separate that out, actually. What it's going to be is you're going to identify what the ethical issue is that they're discussing in the article, and you're going to express that very clearly. And then you're going to go into an evaluation of the article itself. How did the author handle this? What are the issues that are raised that have to be considered? What do we have to weigh here to make a good judgment on this? So that's going to be that final analytical essay. I'll have a specific, really? I'll have specific instructions for you when we get a little further on into the course. I'm still hammering out some of the details of what I want to do with that, but that's in a nutshell what that assignment is going to be. It's going to be at the end, and I'm going to lead you through it in a couple steps. Like there'll be the research step, and then there'll be like some initial statement. Anyway, there'll be little checks along the way to help you, stay on task and complete it without it being a last-minute thing. Okay. Then the main component of your graded assignments is the weekly quizzes. So you're going to see, usually between 20 and 30 questions each week. you'll have an hour typically on each quiz to complete it. When we get to the second half of the class where we're dealing with practical ethical problems or real world problems, applied ethics, when we're doing those, you'll have a short essay question. One of the things we're going to do on our weekly meetings is I'm going to give you those essay questions on the quizzes in advance, because I want you to be able to write them up ahead of time rather than open up the quiz, rush through the multiple choice and true false and stuff, and then get to the essay question and not have enough time to complete it because you're seeing it for the first time. I don't want that. I want instead you to be able to prepare your answer ahead of time and do a copy and paste thing, and that way you can complete the quiz in plenty of time. So look for when we get further on into the applied ethical problems, when we get into that second book, we'll have essay questions and I'll alert you to what those are. Okay, so those are the grade assignments. The grading structure is pretty standard. You can look at that. I've got the grade book set up to do the grade calculations automatically, so you can always check your status based on the assignments you've completed so far, see how you're doing. Attendance. So, we don't have attendance. This is not this session that we're having, the weekly meeting that I hope to do on Google Hangouts with you. I'm not requiring that, obviously, because not everybody can show up. But what I do expect you to do is at least check in to the course on Canvas at least 3 times a week. You want to be looking for announcements. You want to be obviously taking your quiz, but just reviewing materials that are there. You probably noticed that I put a lot of stuff up front in those first 2 announcements, a lot of links for you to work through, a lot of stuff to digest. And so it's helpful to come back, every now and then and review some of those things. So I would say at least 3 times a week, be poking around the course Canvas for the announcements and just keeping on top of your game here. That's the key to success in the online class, is just staying on task, keeping to a schedule, not letting things back up, and certainly not, waiting till the last minute to take a quiz and find out what's going on in the quiz. All right, well, I'll talk more about how to succeed in the class in a little bit. But so attendance 3 times a week. Okay. Late work, just don't do it. I don't reopen quizzes if they pass. Just, plan in advance. If you think you might be going out of town, if you're even considering it, go ahead and take your quiz early. Get it out of the way. Last thing I want to get to is some of the standard things in the syllabus is the schedule. You see the layout here. So it tells you for each week that we're in, it gives you the dates, and then what are our topics that we're talking about, and what are the reading assignments. So it tells you the chapters and from which book. So if you look at Introduction and Chapter 6, Natural Law, they're in that middle column. I don't know if you can see my cursor actually, but I'm going to circle it. So right there, if you see the FE, that tells you which book. It's the Fundamentals of Ethics book. So FE stands for Fundamentals of Ethics. And then the page numbers out here on the right column. Okay, so from day 1 what reading is expected of you, what the reading assignment you have to complete is, and then when the quiz is. So you see for this week's readings, Introduction and Chapter 6, you will be tested on that in Quiz 1, which is due on January 31st. That's this coming Sunday. Okay, so that's how the class schedule works. The item I want to point out to you, which is around spring break here, is week 8. So notice that week 8, this is when we're into our practical ethical problems. This is the second book, The Ethical Life, EL. You have a quiz that's due following those readings, but notice the due date is 2 weeks. So it's not the Sunday at the next week. It's the week after spring break. So notice that date. Good. So that, I give you that Sunday off of where spring break starts. Then we go on into our other moral topics to complete the semester. And then your final week is when your analytical essay will be due. And that's that. Okay, so let me come back now to our screencast. Let me get rid of the screencast, actually. Come back to the Google Hangout. What did I just do? Oh, that's what I did. I think I escaped. Do I not escape? How do I get out of here? Okay. Easy for me to do. All right, let me turn that off. There we go. Hello, I'm back. Good. Well, I see a few more people are here, so let me pop over. Okay, this is interesting. So I'm learning stuff here. This is the first time I've ever done this. And I see now, once I popped out of the screencast, that the showcase comes up by default. Don't know why that is, but that's okay. So the showcase is just a list of things that I'm going to mention or that I think are important references to go back to once we're done. And let me pop over here again to the Q&A, bring that up, and that way you all can submit your questions. So more viewers have chimed in. I know Naomi's here, and I know Leslie's here. Can somebody type in your name if you've also shown up since we started looking at the syllabus? Go ahead. I'll wait, and I'll reset my notes here while I look at what I'm going to be doing next. Oh, this is the good stuff. Now we're going to get to the good stuff, how you succeed in the class. All right. So yeah, if you type in your Q&A there, your name, then I can see who else is here. Anybody else chime in? Now, one thing I'm still curious about is whether the audio, because I'm hearing myself, obviously, but I'm not hearing anyone else speak. So I'm not sure if that's the mic on your end or if it's on the audio on my end. I'm not sure. Okay, so we have a question. I didn't realize, so just to make sure we're getting tested on the introduction in chapter 6. Yes, that's correct. You are being tested on those two chapters, essentially. The introduction is like a chapter, and then chapter 6, or pages 1 to 90. Let me see here about my syllabus. Did I keep one? Was I smart and actually had a printout? I did it. Takes me a second here on this desk. By the way, a family member may show up here. It's Artemus. She is my cat. She is the philosophy cat, and she's here in the room. And she sometimes likes to come and just interfere with what's going on. So you may meet Artemis. Let's see. Page 1 through 90. Okay, so notice, yeah, all right, good. If you have your syllabus, then if you look at each line in the schedule, so if you look at the introduction line, then you look to the right, and it gives you the page numbers for the introduction. So it's pages 1 through 19. Then it skips to chapter 6 is the next line, the natural law theory, and that is pages 76 through 90. So we're leaping over chapters 1 through 5, and you then don't read the entire number of pages between 1 and 90. It's just those specific sections that I've listed there in the right column. Okay, does that answer? Hopefully that answers. Good, good, good. All right, so yay, good. Was that Shiloh who asked that question? Or no, wait, no, sorry, that was Naomi. That was Naomi. Okay, so I see Shiloh said, okay, you're here. Sorry, I couldn't figure this out. What couldn't you figure out, Shiloh? You're here. You're in. So I really want the audio to work. I wonder why it's not working. Okay, but at least you're hearing me, so that's good. Maybe that's good. I think that's good. Okay, let's move on to how to succeed in the class, because I really want to talk about that. What can I say? This is a reading class, and it's not about just blowing through the reading and being able to check off a box and say, I read it. It is about, hi Kelly, it is about reading smartly. And what I've done, let me pull up the showcase real quick and show you those things. So there's some really, really good material in 2 external links I'm giving you here. I don't know if you can see these. So let me show you this one. This is a nice hack for for journaling. So when you read, the key is close reading, and I've given you a couple links to my blog where I've talked about this. I've written a lot of stuff about this because it's so key to succeeding in a philosophy class or any kind of critical thinking class, is to read closely. And I explain what that means. Essentially, what it means is you're reading. Okay, so let me contrast it with something. Reading, like beach reading, where you're reading to be entertained, is more of a passive thing. You are just sort of sitting back and you're just reading line after line after line, and you're just in the story, enjoying the story, and that's all it is. Pleasure reading, right? Desultory reading, I call it. So close reading, though, is where you are probing what you're reading. You're thinking about it. You're taking time, pausing over maybe a difficult passage and reflecting on it and asking questions to the author. So it's like being in a conversation with the author. That's what close reading is like, because you're trying to understand. That's the key. Is close reading is all about trying to understand what the author is telling you. And to do that, what you do is you focus in on the key words. Now, in our text, Fundamentals of Ethics, the author does a really nice job of bolding key terms. So you know, without even having to annotate by circling it or underlining it, you know that you need to know what those terms mean. You need to look carefully at his definitions. You need to look at then the explanations and examples. So you want to understand key terms. That is very, very central to close reading. Okay, then there's other things. I don't want to spend too much time talking about just that, because I've given you materials you can read offline to do that. But now I want to talk about what you do once you're done, sort of looking through the book and making your annotations, in the margins and underlining, circling stuff and all of that. What do you do with that material? And here's what you do. You get yourself a journal. You get yourself something to write with. In fact, you should have it with you while you're reading, because you might want to jot stuff down. What you want to do is you want to take all that effort that you put into close reading, and while it's fresh, you want to be able to then paraphrase things, put things in your own words. Put a question that you had while you were reading and say, once you get through it, have I answered this question? This is still an important question. Those are questions we can talk about here, or you can email me. But you want to be able to recognize the things that are giving you difficulty, because those are often things that are going to show up and that you're going to need to understand. So note questions. So one of the things, and I'm finally getting to this hack, is there is a nice way that you can take just a cheap old composition book like this and use it as a journal. And what you do in this article, it tells you, is you make an index in the back and you do dots along the edge to indicate where key words are. And then what you do is you make that, when you have that key word, when you know, like those bolded terms that are in the text, let's say you use the term moral agent. Okay, so gosh, I need to find all the places where I've read about moral agency, because it's going to come up in later chapters. So if you've written some notes down about moral agency and what that is, how that's what it is that makes us responsible for our actions, you want to be able to get to that. And so what you can do is, I've got moral agent, say, on this page, and then I put a little dot on the line that it's on. And then in the back, on that same line, I look at my edge here and I put another dot back here, and then I write moral agent. So I make an index as I'm going through my journal. Pretty cool hack. Very helpful for when you're trying to pull together concepts that have come from multiple places. Okay, so take a look at that one. Then another really, really nice article that I highly recommend is, and it goes hand in hand with the journal thing, is why you should write things out by hand. One reason is it slows you down. If you've spent time online reading articles, can you remember what the first article you read yesterday was? what was the first thing, something in your Facebook newsfeed, you know, something that you got, you know, sent to you by email, and you open it up. Do you remember what it was, the very first thing? Well, this is the nature of sort of reading on the screen. It's there and then it's gone. And if it's there and we're processing it in the moment, then when we click off of it and we close the tab, it's gone from our consciousness. It's really quite frightening. But what we have with being able to write down our thoughts while we're in the middle of doing the close reading is that we're engaging a different part of our brain, and that part of our brain is struggling to understand, and it's going to retain information. So that's important too, because that gives you more to think about. You have more time to think about. You connect it with other ideas. And this is very important for success on the quizzes, because when you are taking the quiz, even though you have your book in front of you, I mean, you can look up all the questions you want to, but I mean, you got to know where the stuff is, first of all, or else you're just flipping pages the whole time. I mean, you know how an open book quiz is like, and it can be harrowing. So if you have your ideas written down and you've taken the time to write them out by hand in a journal or notebook, then they're already here and they're so much easier to access. Here is, by the way, your memory, universal sign. So yeah, you have them closer to recall, and you can pull them in and use them, you can pull them in and quickly get to them. Yeah, you might want to look something up just to confirm something, but take the time to do the close reading and to journal, and you're going to give yourself a huge, huge, huge advantage. So yeah, great. That is, I think, what I wanted to say about that. I'd say there's three things. So close reading, annotations, and journaling. And then third is getting stuff done on time. So you want to make sure that you are doing your reading well enough in advance that you give yourself time. If you need to, like maybe you hit chapter 8 and it's hard. It's harder than anything else you've read, and you need really to reread it. Give yourself enough time. You know, start earlier in the week so that you can reread, and obviously take enough time too that you can journal, and that you have time for this stuff to think about and reflect on before you take the quiz. So that's a really key part of success, is just staying on top with the schedule. So have a good schedule for completing your readings and for preparing yourself to open that quiz and blowing through it. Yeah, so that is, I would say, the key. Let me show you something now. Actually, let me come back over. So I've been on the showcase for a while, and I've just been talking. So let me see if anybody has got any questions. And feel free, while I'm blabbing and you're getting bored, just go ahead and write a question. So, okay, so we got Shadows here. Yes, figured it out. Kelly, great, good, fantastic. It's so good. This is pretty cool, I have to admit. I'm going to come back to the Periscope thing in a minute. This, I think, is going to work a lot better. Okay, so since this is the first time I've done this, let me get just a little quick feedback too. So anybody who's watching, if you could tell me whether when I had the syllabus up, you were able to see my screen, because it's supposed to work like a screencast. So everybody, were you able to see my screen? That is my question for you. So I'll wait and see what you have to say. Were you able to see the syllabus? Because I want to go and I want to show you the results of a quiz that I gave last semester. But I'm not going to do it if you're not seeing the screencast. So those of you who are here for the going through the syllabus, did you see the syllabus? Awesome. Yes. Excellent. Boy, I love this. Okay. I am so happy with Google Hangouts. Pardon me. I'm what I call a techno noob. I have a love-hate relationship with technology. I think it has really good uses, but I'm often a failure at it. But this is actually working out pretty well. Okay, so let's go to the screen share again. I'm going to pull up the quiz, if I can do that, because I've got. something I want to show you here. Ta-da! Okay, so this is what I get to see after you complete a quiz. I get to have these wonderful statistics. And if you look over in this corner or upper right corner, I don't know if you can see my mouse. I think possibly you can, but you know, I can drill down into to the analysis of specific students. So I can see individually, you know, what was going on. And also if you see here in the bottom left, it says question breakdown. So I can look and see how each question, you know, was what the performance was on each question. So that's really a cool tool for me because I get to see which questions were giving people the most problem, and then I can anticipate, you know, problems that people have. All right, so the reason I wanted to show you this was let's see, this was the first quiz from last semester. So it shows you all this fun stuff like the average, the high and the low, and the average time. So you see, you know, it was a 60-minute quiz, so everybody, you know, got done in plenty of time. But look at the specific student breakout here. Okay, so here are the grades. Now, what this tells me, I know this stuff because I've been doing this for years and years. I know exactly what's going on with these folks here in the 55 to 75 range. They didn't do the reading. This is a perfect example of a performance that is not, it may have been a quick read through. It may have been, oh, let me just catch the bold terms and move on. It may have been, you know, a complete reading, but they were distracted. They weren't really paying attention and focusing in and trying to understand. So it wasn't a close reading. I know that's what was going on because I know the kinds of questions that I have are designed to break out the folks who do close reading from those who don't. So anybody who does not get a B or better, I know has not done close reading. Or, you know, maybe just froze up on the quiz or something, who knows, but more than likely it's that they didn't do the close reading. So that's why you will hear me say this probably multiple times through the semester, how this is so central to what you do. It's all about reading smart. And some of the people up in the low B range here, however, are probably did, you know, a decent reading, probably, you know, made annotations in their text, but I doubt that they really digested it well enough. They didn't chew it over. They didn't reflect on it. They didn't think about it. And because that's what happens when you write things out by hand, when you journal and you express your ideas, paraphrase the author, think of examples, you know, complain about, you know, what the author says, stuff like that, where you're working all your thoughts out. More than likely, these folks here read pretty well, but they didn't take that extra step to really digest the material. Okay, so that's why step 2 to success is making notes, journaling. And then the folks here then who succeeded, you know, I would say succeeded, obviously, are people who got the high Bs to the 100%, are folks who did this, who took my 3 steps and did it. And because my tests are, my quizzes, I should say, I keep saying tests, quizzes are, they have 2 types of questions. And let me just come off of this now. Let's see if I can get out of here. Stop sharing. Do we come back? No, we don't come back. All right, let me come back. Here we are. Ah, there we are. Hi again. So what happens is that there are 2 types of questions, and I like to call them my A-B questions because they separate the A student from the B student. So what happens is in the B questions are, people who will get to a B but can't get over into the A are students who are able to answer like factual questions, questions that don't require independent thought. All you have to do is know the text really well, and you're going to get a B, probably even a high B. But there are the A questions in there that are designed by me to challenge you to apply what you've learned and to do some critical thinking. I'm going to go through actually an example here in just a moment. We need to wrap up in the next 20 minutes. But I want to go through some slides with you and show you an example of what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's move on to then, what do we want to talk about next? Great. So let me see. Let me just clear the board here because wow, cool, excellent. So I love that the showcase works. I love that the screencast works. Excellent. All right, so how to read the text. So you've got bolded terms that I've already mentioned. Then you will have italicized definitions, and you need to know that material. I will always have a question or multiple questions on the quiz that you need to be able to recognize the definitions of the key terms. So look for the bolded stuff and the italicized stuff. You are almost guaranteed that that's going to be on the quiz. Then the other nice feature of this text, besides him calling attention to those key ideas, is a glossary. So this is in the back of the book, and it actually has this crazy page number, what, G something, G1. So almost in the very back of the book. And yeah, so in here, he collects all the terms, so it's alphabetical, so you can look up other terms instead of trying to find it, back in the middle of the text if you need to recall something. Glossary really handy to get that same material, the bolded term and the italicized definition. So everything, all the key stuff is there in the glossary. So very helpful to use. So make sure you use that. The next thing I want to talk about is arguments, because your author does a fantastic job of presenting arguments. And you're going to read in the introduction, if you haven't already, pages 1 through 19, about what an argument is, what are its components, premises, and a conclusion, and how you then analyze an argument. What makes a good argument and a bad argument? So there's material in there to talk about that. It's really important because what we want to be able to do is evaluate these different theories we're going to be looking at for the arguments that have been marshaled for them and marshaled against them. So we want to be able to understand the arguments and how arguments work. Very, very key. And he does a very nice thing. When he presents like a key argument for or a key argument against a position, he breaks it out in the text in a formal fashion. So let me just quickly put my finger on one because I had one here. Okay, so page 11, if you've got your text, you can look on page 11 at the top. He's got an argument. And what he does is he numbers propositions. So proposition is just a sentence, and it's either a premise or a conclusion. So it's proposing that something is the case. And so here are the three propositions of the first argument that I've come across in his text in a formal fashion. So it's the numbered sentences. So 1, heroin is a drug. 2, selling heroin is illegal. 3, therefore heroin is immoral. Okay, so heroin is a drug. Selling heroin is illegal. So those are two premises. Those are claims that, if true, are supposed to establish the truth of the conclusion. The conclusion is signaled by the word therefore. So therefore, if those things are true, therefore heroin use is immoral. So the claim is that that argument, that conclusion falls from the premises. Now your author goes in to look at that specific argument, but I just want to point out the format that he presents these arguments in. So you want to pay close attention to each of the specific arguments that he calls out, and he'll give it some name, like the argument from humanity or something like that. That's actually one of the ones in natural law. So that's a key part of the reading that you want to sort of mull over. Now what happens, typically what he'll do is he'll give you that argument in the numbered sentences, and that's the formal version of it. And then in the paragraph that follows, he'll do an exposition of the argument. So he'll explain the premises to you, and he'll explain how the argument works together, how the claims are connected to each other. He'll point out maybe ambiguous terms, things like that. So he goes in and he does an analysis of the argument and points out strengths and weaknesses. So that's how the book works. Really, really helpful, really, really easy to follow in that sense. I'm not saying the content is easy. I'm saying that the layout, the format, the flow of it is really, really good. One of the best textbooks I've ever taught from. Okay, so then the other part of the how to read the text. Have I mentioned close reading? Yeah, I think I have. So close reading. is key, because when you get into that material, the content, the paragraph by paragraph, where he's doing explanation and exposition of arguments, that's where the close reading comes in. Okay. So let's talk then about how to analyze arguments. I want to go now to my slide deck. So back to the screen share. I call it screencast. Yeah. All right, here we go. So pulling up the deck, and I'm gonna run through these a little quickly because I don't want to go too far over 8:30. Whoops, I started in the middle. Actually, that didn't matter. That was a completely useless thing. All right. Oh, that's me. Yes. Okay. So that's my email address, my Twitter handle if you want to contact me. And so let's talk then about analyzing arguments, because that is going to be key. This is really important for a couple of the quiz questions. And these, by the way, are what I was talking about earlier. It's these questions where I'm asking you to analyze an argument that separate the B from the A students. Okay. Or I shouldn't say that. No, that's not fair. You all are A students. It separates B performance from A performance on the quizzes. That's fair. That's better. Much better. Okay. So 3 steps to analyze an argument. First of all, express it in standard form. Usually your author does this for you, so it's a no-brainer, but you can also learn how to do this on your own. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to express some arguments for you on the quizzes in standard form, and then you're gonna do the steps 2 through 3. So then the second step is to test for validity, and read pages 1 through 19 for an explanation of that. And then you test for soundness, which is, is it a good argument? Is it a bad argument? Is the argument probably true, or is it definitely true? Okay. So standard form, let me just lay that out again so you can see it sort of in broad terms here, schematic terms. So it's numbered sentences, and it starts with the premises, and there's always at least one premise, and then there is the conclusion at the end of the premise or premises. So the conclusion is always the last sentence, and I put the underline there just to break off that everything above the line are claims that, if true, establish the truth of the conclusion. Okay, that's how that structure works. So now let's talk about how you test for validity. What you do is you assume that the premises are all true. Even if they're not true, you don't have to know if they're true. You just assume that they're true. Then you ask, if they're true, does the conclusion have to be true if the premises are true? Could the conclusion still be false even if the premises are true? Okay, that is the what's called the inferential link, that if the premises are true, then the conclusion has to be true. So you ask yourself, does that conclusion follow if the premises are true? Does it have to be true? If it is, if so, the argument is valid. If not, it's invalid. That doesn't mean that the argument is false. It means it's invalid. Invalid is, or validity or invalidity is a feature of the structure of the argument, of how the concepts are related to each other. So it's a formal problem. It's not a problem with the content of the argument per se. It's about the structure of it. So your author goes into that in detail. So what you want to do is make that test for validity. Then third, you want to test for soundness. And the way you do this, it's process of elimination. You first isolate each premise, start with the first one, and then you want to ask, is it plausible? Okay, you ask, is this true? Is it in fact true, or is it likely to be true? And then if it is true, or likely to be true, or plausibly true, then go on to the next premise. Okay, there's a little bit of gray here because some premises you may not be sure based on the wording maybe, or maybe it requires some other kind of knowledge to know whether it's true. But you have to go with what you know. All right, so that's what you're doing. And what you often know is the material that's discussed in your text. So go with what the text has presented to you. Okay, last step then is oh, sorry, not the last step per se, but if the premise is true or likely true, then you go on to the next one. So a poor argument will always have a false premise. So it will, in other words, by poor argument, I mean an unsound argument. In other words, it might be valid, its structure might be okay, so that the truth is preserved. But if it's got a false premise in it, then the argument falls apart, doesn't work. So that's what I call a poor argument. So if there's a false premise in there, then you know that the argument doesn't work. It's a bad argument. Then a good argument is likely, though, to have at least one premise that is reasonably controvertible. Okay, that means it is open to question or dispute. And that's what philosophers love to do. That's where their bread and butter is they look at arguments, they make arguments, and then they analyze arguments, and they examine the premises to see which ones are most controvertible. And you have to be reasonably controvertible. Of course, you can just, out of a contentious attitude, you can challenge anything, but you want to have good reasons to question a premise. So you want to be able then to identify, even in a good argument, you want to identify, well, where's the weak link in this argument? There's got to be a premise that is reasonably controvertible. And the reason there has to be is because, and this is, by the way, this is my opinion, that all good, interesting, substantive ideas and arguments, substantive ideas, are always going to be open to question. That's the nature of philosophy, is investigation into the truth of things, and the bringing it before the bar of reason and interrogating all of those claims to see whether they actually are true. That's what we do. And you're always going to be able to do that with at least one premise. And that's where you are able to weigh the pros and the cons to an argument, is in finding that controvertible premise. But let me come back, because I've said a lot about that. Is what you're going to be asked to do oftentimes is be able to find out whether an argument is good or not based on the quality of its premises. Okay, so you will have an example here in just a moment. Let's look at it. Here is your quiz question. I think this is probably the hardest question on the quiz. And I won't read each of the premises, but I'll just point out that you've got 3 premises, and then you have a conclusion. So total of 4 sentences. And then the question is, so that's an argument, and then the analysis of the argument is also given to you. And the analysis says, since natural law theorists, so this is related to the material in chapter 6, since natural law theorists accept the truth of the premises, that's sentences 1 through 3, they must accept that the conclusion is also true. Okay, then I ask you, why is this a poor analysis of the argument? Now notice what that's telling you. It's telling you that it is a poor analysis of the argument. So now what you've got to do, you're told that there is some problem here. It's a poor argument. Okay, and I'm sorry, it's a faulty argument because the analysis is faulty. And so where's the problem? So that's where you go and do what I just said about analyzing arguments. It's already in standard form, so you don't have to do that. It's valid. You can check for validity, but it is valid. And then what you do then is test for soundness, the third step. And what you do is isolate each premise and ask, is this in fact true? I'm going to do this with you. Not all of them, but I want to do the first one with you because I think this will be helpful, not only for as a sort of introductory lesson to how to do philosophy and arguments, but going forward into the later material. Okay, so let's isolate that first one. And I want to point out one thing. There is this word in here, some, and there's another word, since, but I'll talk about that in a minute. So some is a word of quantity. So notice that it says, it is in our nature to behave in some respects as other animals do. Now, another quantity word would be all, right? Or every. So if this, notice how the claim changes if you have a different quantity. It's in our nature to behave in every respect as other animals do. That's a much stronger claim. So having the quantity some means at least one. It's in our nature to behave in at least one respect as other animals do. That's a pretty low bar to be truthful, right? So, and you can probably think of ways in which humans, being animals, share their nature with other animals and behave in some respects, at least one respect, as other animals do. Okay, so notice words like some. Those are important trigger words. Then the word since is indicating that there's a premise there. And the premise is the humans are animals phrase. So that's what we call an indicator word. So that tells you that there's some structure to this sentence. So even though, here's I want to back up for a second. So even though I laid this out as a single premise, notice that it's a premise that is itself an argument. It has one premise and it has a conclusion. All right, I'm going to break this out now so you can see this. So what I have in 1 star through 3 star is exactly the same meaning as the single sentence 1. So let's look at that. If humans are animals, notice the hypothesis there. If humans are animals, then it's in human nature to behave in some respects as other animals do. And then 2, it is the case that humans are animals. So notice that what that does, and there at the bottom in white, since humans are animals, that phrase is equal to propositions 1 star and 2 star. You see how that works? So the first 1 star sets up a hypothesis. It says, if humans are animals, then it's human nature, da da da. Then premise 2, what it does is it says, it is the case that humans are animals. Oh, if it's the case that humans are animals, then I guess it is the case also that it's human nature to behave in some respects as other animals do. That's the therefore. That's 3 star. So you see how this is in premise 1 of the argument. It's actually a mini argument in itself. So you can take the time to do this yourself when you're presented with arguments that are complex, like this one. Okay, so let me come back here and just show you the argument again. What you do then is you do that analysis of premise 1. So I'm going to come back in just a minute out of the screencast, and I want to ask you what your opinion is on the one that we just looked at. Do you think, doing the soundness test, do you think that premise is likely to be true or is true? If you think it is, then you would go on. Well, actually, you should do it anyway. You should go on and look at premise 2 and premise 3 and look at those each for their plausibility. Ask, is this actually true? Okay, so cool beans. Let me pop back out of here and come back to our show. Excellent. I'll get to your question in just a minute, Naomi. So what I want to ask you is then, what did you think of premise 1 then? Did you think that premise 1 was likely true? Did that seem to be correct to you? Go ahead and pop into the Q&A and tell me what you think. Anybody want it? Maybe everybody's like, oh, I don't want to say. It's okay. You can say. It's class. It's fine. Nobody will know but me. Anybody want to take a stab at it? What did you think? Well, I'll tell you what. I'll give you a little more time to do it. I'm going to answer Naomi's question here. So let me select this. Maybe this shows up if I do this. Do quizzes get more intense or challenging throughout the semester? Or would you say the first quiz is similar to the last quiz? Well, it's similar in this way. All the quizzes are similar in this way. They all consist of likely true, says Leslie. Yes, I agree with that. I think that is likely true. So guess what? I mean, when you take the quiz, you'll be able to scratch off one of the answer choices. Because premise 1, when you do the test for soundness, you isolate that premise and you say, is this really true? Break it down and maybe even think of examples. And yeah, this one passes the test. Move on to the next one. Check that one. Okay. So great job, Leslie. Okay, so let me get back to Naomi's question. Or would you say the first quiz is similar to last? Okay. They're similar in this way, that all the quizzes are going to have predominantly multiple choice, multiple answer, true, false, standard stuff. And so you get that grade automatically by Canvas. Then when we get to the second half of the class, this is the week starting right ahead of spring break, when we get to our ethical problems section, there are going to be short essay questions, short argument questions, like 200 words. And all of those I'm going to give you in advance, and you will have time to prepare your answer in advance, and just copy and paste it when you open the quiz. So that's different, but I wouldn't say it's harder necessarily, because I'm going to prepare you for it. What else should I say about this? No, I really do try to be consistent in the level of difficulty with the quizzes that I design. I have certain kinds of questions, to sort of align up with different grade levels. And one thing you can Google is depth of knowledge, DOK. And what I try to do is make sure that I have, at least some level 1 questions, which are like just basic fact stuff. You just look it up in a book and it's there, up to level 4. And level 4 are the kinds that are like the ones we were just doing, that argument question, where you have to apply what you've been reading about and independently figure it out. I mean, the answer to that question is not here in the book, at least not directly. What you need to be able to find that answer is here in the book, but you have to kind of work, you have to reason through it on your own. It's not something you just look up and get. So those are the hardest questions, and I always have at least 2 or 3 like those in order to, as I was saying before, make my A-B distinction. So yeah, the hardness level of the quiz is pretty consistent. I'm trying to think of anything else I could add about that. No, I think really the difficulty, any change in difficulty is a factor of the actual content in the reading. So some of the theories are simply more difficult to grasp. I'll give you a warning. The Kantian theory, for example, is complex. And it's really a shift from the theories that came before it in our text. So I mean, a lot of people struggle with that one. Even the one before that, consequentialism, is also pretty complex. There's a lot of content, or more content, I guess, than the earlier chapters, and it's just simply a more complex theory because they're trying to flesh out more problems, or they have more problems to flesh out. Yeah, so I guess that's my answer. Is it kind of depends on the difficulty of the chapter itself, but the quizzes I try to keep them the same. Okay, good. Any other questions? Yeah, so we need to wrap up, and let me just check my notes here and make sure that I covered something. Oh yeah, so yeah, talking about ethical theory, theory. Look, one of the things I really like about this book is what he has to say about moral reasoning. In fact, I emphasize that in the notes or the announcement I gave you. And it is it's really important to be able to really struggle with the moral questions we're going to get in the second half, is if you take these theories seriously. And when you think theory in philosophy or theory in ethics, a lot of times people will just say, well, that's just a theory. But that phrase, just a theory, it just doesn't work. It's not accurate, because a theory, a normative theory, means it is a well-developed set of ideas with some basic fundamental principles that are, very likely to be true, and that it is an explanatory system that sort of can be tested. It is a lot like a scientific theory in that respect. You can test moral theories. That's what we're doing in the second half of the class, is we're testing these moral theories. So you can pose hypotheses, and you can set up experiments, and you can figure out how strong, how robust is the theory to answer these problems and these questions. So I just encourage you to have that kind of point of view when it comes to thinking about these different theories. Just because there are multiple moral theories does not mean that that one of them isn't probably true, or that one isn't most useful, or something like that. So anyway, I really like thinking about the significance of what it means to have an ethical theory, and these ones especially have been time tested, and that have been tweaked and adjusted, and new data. There's an example of the comparison. So you do a scientific experiment, right? You're testing a scientific theory. What do you need? You need data. So you run experiments and you have this empirical data, right, with instruments and stuff, and you measure things. Well, what do you do? What's the equivalent in philosophy, in moral theory? The equivalent is the data of life. It is historical experience. It is lived experience that we have. That all is raw data for our theories, for ethical theories. That's what we're doing. And so that's one way to think about it, I guess, that is kind of helpful. Okay, so I think that's really all that I had that I wanted to cover. I had a couple other notes on some terms that are here in the chapter, but really not much to say about that. I do want to say actually one thing. I'm sorry I went a little bit long, but I've already talked about what's in the introduction. So you have then the main areas of ethical theory. So big picture overview, and then you have what I think is the most important part of the whole text is pages 9 through 15. It is where he talks about moral reasoning, how it works, how it doesn't work. And you're going to find many questions taken from that. So read that very closely. So yeah, do have a close look at the 3 areas of moral philosophy, and then pages 9 through 15 on moral reasoning are really crucial, and you have lots of questions. Okay, in chapter 6 in natural law theory, so you have, here's the structure. Okay, here is how it's laid out for you. So there are 4 things that are huge advantages of natural law theory. So he talks with that. First, he gives you a definition of what the theory is, and then he says, hey, here is why this is a very promising theory. And 4 things that are strengths of the theory. Then you run into the first problem. Okay, so it's like, oh, things are going swimmingly well, and then you hit a brick wall, and the brick wall is what's called the is-ought problem. And he spends a couple pages talking about this. So read that part carefully, because it's a long-standing problem in ethical theory since the philosopher David Hume, who really first formulated it in a way that's kind of stood the test of time back in the 1700s. So the is-ought problem is really important, and the issue there is, and this is very important for natural law theory, because natural law theory claims that moral judgments can be settled by empirical knowledge. So we can know what the right thing to do is based on facts, and that's a really stunning. To us, that sounds like a really stunning idea, or surprising idea, I should say. But for the longest time, natural law theory was sort of taken for granted that, hey, if we know reality, if we have the best grasp as possible on reality, then we will know what to do based on that knowledge of reality. But it turns out that that's oftentimes very difficult to do. And natural law theory thinks that bridge can be overcome. Most philosophers do not. So have a look at the is-ought problem. Then in the human nature section, this is the sort of the heart of the whole chapter. You have 3 things that you get out of that, 3 concepts that are key. You have the human nature as innate, Lady Gaga is born that way. Then you have the common traits, the idea of human nature as the set of traits that are universal to humanity. Maybe that's what human nature is. And then third, the definition of human nature in terms of our natural purpose. So what are humans for? What is our function? What is our natural function? And there are 2 models then that answer that question. What is our function as human beings? What are humans for? The 2 models are the efficiency model and the fitness model. So that's the structure of your quiz. And then the remainder of the chapter is talking about problems then with the natural law theory. So that is that chapter. Oh, last word. On the last 2 pages, he talks about definitions, because a lot of talking about human nature comes down to problems with definition, how we define terms, not least of which is nature. And he makes a point of saying that, look, you can't solve difficult moral problems by simply defining them away. You can't define terms just to suit, solving a problem or to make a problem go away. It doesn't work like that. That doesn't mean definitions aren't very important for doing moral reasoning. They're extremely important. They can't solve moral problems, but they can help us clarify what the problems are. Where is the issue that has to be resolved in order for the theory to solve all the problems that it claims to be able to solve? So definitions are important, but they don't make problems go away. So that's a really important thing. That's one of your quiz questions, by the way. I ask you, I think it's a true false question. I ask you, hey, you know, I think the statement is, according to the author, definitions are of absolutely no use in doing moral philosophy. That's false. Oh my gosh, I just told you an answer. That's false. It is. If you don't read it carefully, though, you'll think that's what he's saying, because what he does is he raises that, oh, like definitions are no good, and he talks about how they're no good. But if you don't pay attention to, he's just talking about they're no good for solving moral problems on their own by defining them away, but it is good for something, and that's in the very last paragraph of the chapter. So that's about, and you catch that through close reading. It's a really easy question, but it's easy to get wrong if you don't read closely. There, I said it again, close reading. It's the key to success, folks. Okay, I really am glad you all have been able to show. Let me just clear my board here and see. Is there any last questions? I mean, I went a few minutes over. So are there any questions that you have for me before we say bye-bye? I think this is pretty cool. I do want to resolve the audio problem, and because I think that maybe we're supposed to hear each other. I mean, I should be able to hear you, but I'll see if I can figure that out. And if I do figure it out, I'll post some instructions on Canvas. Body. Okay, so cool. If you do come up with questions, you know, right after we quit, then fire off an email. Hey, everybody, I'm really glad that that you all were able to show up. Really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to do this. I hope it was helpful. And there'll be a replay on YouTube probably very, very soon tonight. And if you want to review anything that I went over, you know, feel free to do that. So I'm going to sign off, and I will see you next week. I'll let you know when our next meeting is going to be and give you advance notice. I'll probably make it earlier in the week, but I'll let you know. And be seeing you. If you have any questions, fire them off to me. Can I see you? No, I can't see you, actually, Naomi. So even if you have a webcam, that doesn't work with Google Hangouts. It's only the broadcaster who you can see. I don't know if there's some way to do that. I think that'd be like a Skype thing, but yeah. So, but I think I should be able to hear you, but I'm not. So anyway, I'll try to resolve that. Yeah, what was I saying? Oh yeah, so I will post an announcement about our next meeting. And if you have any questions before the first quiz, fire them off by email. Be glad to answer them, and enjoy the reading, and good luck on the quiz. I'll see you next week.